everyone. Welcome to Thrivecast. I am Alan Wallner, the president and visionary of Conscious Branding, and it's a bold new world. And Thrivecast is our series of panel discussions focused on you, your business, and your success. And we know with each episode, we're going to focus on a topic of interest to spark new thoughts, generate ideas that may not be the norm, and maybe even push some boundaries of what we knew as familiar. We'll even, hopefully, ideally, frame up a new mindset to ignite your business forward and inspire action. So we got a lot of fun things we're going to be talking about today. And to get things started, I want everyone to kind of post in the chat kind of how they're feeling about our current business climate. Is it stressing you out? Are you feeling fearful about it? Just kind of put in there and let us know kind of how you're feeling. Too much fun. That's a pretty good one. We got surprisingly optimistic. That's good. Yeah, it's always good to have some positive energy around it. We got some overwhelmment. It's a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings are kind of going around these days, and kind of all over the board. And today we're going to be talking about one of these universal emotions, which is fear. And fear is not always a bad thing. When we feel the sense of danger or feel unsafe, fear kind of helps protect us. But in some cases, fear can paralyze us or keep us from progressing and moving forward, which has been known to happen with everyone. It's normal. These are normal behaviors. So today we're going to take a look at avoiding that paralysis and how we can turn fear into fuel. And I'm very grateful to have our panelists here today. We have Stephanie Courtillier, founder and CEO of Integrous Women. Stephanie's paving the way for the next generation of conscious leaders, and she's on a mission to inspire, educate, and empower women to create their own purpose-driven futures. Glad to have you here today, Stephanie.
Thank you, Alan. So excited to be here. Nice to see all these lovely faces. Thanks for those that have videos on, so I get to meet you. Hi, and then all the rest in the chat.
All right. And then we have Lisa Poulson. She's the principal of poseycorp. Lisa works with innovators to become great communicators who create the change they want to see in the world. She's also an author who writes about grief, love, and the complexity, and the complex beauty of female power. So, Lisa, welcome. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you.
And then we have Rosemary Davies-Janes. She's the founder and CEO of MIBOSO. And Rosemary specializes in done-for-you business turnarounds and growth. And she's putting small and mid-sized businesses on the fastest paths possible to re-emergence and working with business owners to fulfill their dreams. Rosemary, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me back. It's great to be here, and I think we've got an exciting conversation coming up.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be good. So I want to thank you all for being here, and thank the attendees for being here as well today. I'm getting anxious to hear what you have to say, so I'm going to kind of cut to the chase and get started with our first question. So, fear is it's a vital response to physical and emotional danger, and it has been pivotal throughout our evolution as a species. And if people don't feel fear, they wouldn't be able to protect themselves from legitimate threats, which often had life or death consequences in our ancestral world. In the modern world, though, the need to protect ourselves from those types of threats has been lowered significantly until now to some degree. So how do you see the degree of today's fears being similar or dissimilar to the fears of our ancestral world? So I'm going to lead off our conversation with Rosemary.
Okay, this is a great question. And I think things are kind of the same and kind of quite different. So there are kind of three things I'd like to touch on. First of all, we have so much more access to information from around the globe than our predecessors had. So I think what we need to do is start with an intellectual and intuitive check and just determine, is it a fact or is it a fear? Because whatever we put our focus on becomes our reality. We have this lovely little device in our brain, our reticular activation system, and you'll notice it if you ever are planning to buy a new car. You never noticed this car before, but once you take a look at a couple in a dealer showroom, all of a sudden they start popping up everywhere because that's what our attention gets focused on. And it's like, wow, I didn't realize it was such a popular car. So you've got to check out what's going on and see because there's nothing worse than being afraid of something that's not real. So trust and verify. And I've added a reference book in the PDF I supplied that will be available to listeners with the recording. And it's a great book for distinguishing real fear from unreal fear, if you will. It's called The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. It's been around for probably 20 years now. And it talks about how we are wired as human beings to use our adrenaline rush, use our natural flight, fight, or freeze response to our best advantage. But there's really no use burning up all that adrenaline if you're getting fearful about something that's not real. Second point is we have a choice. We can choose our internal influence, our intuition, our guidance, however we seek that, or we can choose to be influenced by what's external to us. And entrepreneurs, business owners, we're courageous by nature. We're leaders, we're not followers. So it's all about choosing your perspective, your reality, and sticking with it for as long as it serves you to do so, because everything is always changing. So it's necessary once you make that choice to keep adapting it to new circumstances that are emerging. And really, and I think entrepreneurs, business owners are fabulous at this, learning to ride the wave of change, and keep our vessels upright and moving strongly. The third point, and this is really kind of funny, is when we choose a brave course, we get the option. We can choose to be Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, or we can choose to be Tigger. We can be the wet blanket that spreads misery, or we can spread joy. But we also have a responsibility to keep certain protocols in place. What's symbolic for this right now are the masks. Anyone who's done any research understands that surgical masks aren't much used outside of a sterile environment, and non-surgical masks, the ones that we're mandated to use, don't really block anything as small as the COVID virus. However, when we wear them, we make others around us feel safe. So those are really the three things we've got to keep in mind, is discerning whether the fear is real, whether we're going to choose to focus on it, and whether or not we're going to let that fear be inflamed by external influences, or if we're going to go internally, as many of us have done during this time. I hear a lot of people are meditating more, they're reflecting more, and just make our choices and keep flexing those choices to keep us moving forward consistently on the path, as that path changes, as it no doubt will continue to do.
Yeah, there's, it just kind of keeps going. I like kind of how you said, what is fact and what isn't fact.
Yeah.
So really looking at what's a truth, and then acting accordingly from there. And you have a choice around how you act. So I like that.
Absolutely. And if I can put one more thing in, you just reminded me, I heard a great quote the other day. We all have the right to our own opinions, but we do not have the right to our own facts. So, facts are not malleable, or they shouldn't be.
Yeah. All right. So Stephanie, kind of like to hear your thoughts around all this too.
Thank you, Alan. And I actually want to kind of dive maybe deeper into something Rosemary mentioned, which was this external versus internal. Because when I think back to maybe ancestral days, it's fear I would only assume would look like a bear coming at me to attack me, right? And it's like survival mode is what that fear stands for. However, what's interesting with where we are today is many, and I'm going to use the reference of entrepreneurs, kind of just looking at who in the chat is either a business owner for 20 years, I think I saw, but some are just starting out, is we still feel like we're in survival mode, but it's internal. So to me, it's this kind of external versus internal factors of back in the day. A lot of the fear came because it was an actual bear coming at me. I have to survive. It's life or death on a daily basis. But we're still living in that same way because internally we're identifying life or death with things like toxic stress. When too much stress, is overloading our brain, it actually goes and starts to, it kind of attacks our internal body, right? We get things like burnout, like depression, clinical depression, and then you really get into these really scary areas. So to me, it's always been just kind of identifying, and I loved even just some of these points that I've already been mentioned, but identifying is that, can I die right now? It's like public speaking. I remember I was so afraid to public speak. And people kind of joke with me like, you were never introverted. I'm like, trust me, if you knew me 10 years ago, I was the shyest kid around. Like, I hated being anywhere front and center. But to stand in front of a room and speak to people, it's that same fear response that we're experiencing. I feel like I'm going to die if I have to talk to a group of 10 people, let alone 50, let alone 5,000. And so I think a lot of when we kind of go into the science of it, and I love, Rosemary, that you kind of went into the neuroscience. I love Dr. Joe Dispenza, for those who are familiar with his work in neuroscience and epigenetics. When you understand how our brain chemistry works and how we process stress, it's called our limbic system. There's something called the hippocampus and the amygdala. It's the regulation of our emotions. And so to understand that, that calm down piece, if we can start to control and be aware of, I'm not going to die right now, right? Like, let's just be aware of that. I am choosing to react in this way. We get to start to manage that flow of energy that comes in when we get really, really nervous. And something that's worked really well for me is turning that fear into excitement. So I joined something like Toastmasters, and I'm like, how do I make this fun for myself? As crazy as this sounds right now, as much as I hate public speaking, how can I make this a fun experience? And now I'm in control of that response. And what used to be this nausea and this, I just didn't want to get up on stage, turned into eventually just little butterflies. That was kind of this excitement energy because I was making it fun and I shifted the mindset around it. So there's a lot of maybe similarities to back in our ancestral world with the fear. I think the main shift though is recognizing before it was real, it was external. Now it's still very real, but we're only because we're choosing for it to be that real internally. So once we become aware of that, we now have first awareness is key, but then we have the choice to make that difference and to start to make, and I know we're going to kind of talk about this for the rest, but those small little shifts on a daily basis, and to recognize the power really is in our minds. And this is where I love getting into, I love research, I love people, I'm fascinated by things like psychology and mental health, because there's so much once you understand how our brains work that we can actually make the difference.
Yeah, and I think one of the good points you brought up is back in the day you'd have a bear running at you, but today a lot of it's conjured up through the media and what you're seeing on television. And the coronavirus is something that's invisible, but yet there's a fear of death around it potentially. So it's interesting how something right in front of you can create that, and something not in front of you can also create it. All right, so Lisa, I'd like to hear your perspective around all this.
Well, what Rosemary and Stephanie said is really important, because we just have to remember that our bodies are mammals. And so the limbic brain, 90% of mammals have the same structure in the brains, and the limbic brain doesn't have capacity for language and doesn't have capacity for rational thought. My favorite book on this is Robert Sapolsky's Behave. So now you've got 3 books about neurobiology that would be super interesting. But just a tiny little addition to what they've both said, talking about choice, one of my favorite expressions is, you're not responsible for your first thought, but you are responsible for your second. So these reactions, I've read research that says that our reaction comes in 0.003 milliseconds. We can't keep from having the initial reaction of fear or the initial reaction of anger. What we can do is pause, and developing that capacity to take a pause and see ourselves. That's hard work, but we can take a pause, and then we can choose what we want to say and how we behave and how we think. And for me, I think this is an answer to a later question about how do you manage the fear. But so, yeah, today's fears are exactly the same and amplified. We've got both.
Yeah, and I think, our bodies still work the same way with our brains. So
Yeah.
they're going to be created the same way, creating the same chemicals that we had back in the day, or that our ancestors had. It's just, we have to process them differently today.
Yeah.
And so it creates some unique things because we're not in that mode every day, so that we can learn how to use, how to deal with that. But so we're in a mode right now where we have to try and figure that out. And it's something that a lot of us aren't familiar with. All right. So through your recent interactions with other business owners, how is today's fear impacting their ability to make quality decisions for their businesses? And let's see, with that, and I guess, I'll add to that, why is making big decisions out of fear generally not a good idea? And I'll start with Stephanie on that.
I have to quote a very wise woman, my mother. She always said, we're either in fear, so your head's either turned one direction in fear or it's turned the other direction in love. You can't be in both spaces at once. And to comprehend that, as simple as it is, can be really complex in the sense that when I'm facing fear, I'm restrictive, I'm contracted, I'm not being, to the polar opposite in love, which is open and creative. And so to answer the first part of your question, how is it impacting the decisions of business owners? I think to be in fear is to react, versus to be in love is to be proactive, I think, in our decision and our responses. So I've watched, especially with COVID, especially with the racial justice issues that are happening, many businesses we watch those fight, flight, freeze responses, once again, to that first question of our survival mechanism, come into play in business. So I've watched many businesses freeze. I've watched many business owners go, I need to get the heck out of here. I'm in the wrong industry, like travel industry. I've watched people either have to be let go of their jobs or completely just halt, and then they're surviving. So to expect a business owner to make decisions in that mentality and that mindset of fight, flight, or freeze, it's all survival. I don't think it's in a space of that love, of actually taking maybe a strategic pause instead and going, where do I get to shift my business? This, and kind of even just, it's all mindset. It's looking at, change is the only constant in the world. And yet we fear change so much. And we're never prepared for it, right? So it's almost, how do I build those habits or skills as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, knowing for sure change is going to happen. I'm going to have to evolve and emerge. And it's the business owners that I connect with who have that mentality, who all of us, I think, had that initial shock reaction of survival, of fight, flight, freeze in one way or another. But it's the ones that we're able to adapt from there and not get stuck, right, in fear, and slowly go, okay, why is this happening for me, not against me? These types of questions, right? How do we shift the questions we ask ourselves? Not victim mode, but growth mode. And there's a big, big power in recognizing, because we're all humans. We're all gonna, I do this probably at like 1,000 times every single day. But it's the habit of knowing when I'm sitting over here in this fear zone, to slowly make my way back over here to make decisions. Because when I've seen it, when we all make decisions in this space, we know it. We feel that gut reaction, like, this isn't the best decision. I don't even feel like I've got all the information. I'm literally just reacting to what's in front of me on a daily basis. But to be able to sustain and scale and be in that excitement, even just, when we're in our flow, quote unquote, there's a great book called Flow. When we're in that space of growth and passion, and the universe is responding, right? Because we're seeing all the doors open, that's when we know we're working from this space. So it's vitally important as business owners that we consciously make this shift. And like I said, it's gonna happen thousands of times on a micro level every single day, but over time, especially when we're making big decisions as businesses, that we come from this. There's a great book I love conscious capitalism as a whole. Alan, you and I have talked multiple times, and I was so excited, just the shift in your business into this conscious space. But Conscious Capitalism has a field guide. And in it, they actually explain the story, and I'm going to totally butcher it, but like high level, the essence of the story was this business owner was sharing. And for those that aren't familiar with conscious capitalism, they have kind of like 4 areas around consciousness that they talk about, which is purpose, leadership, stakeholders, and culture. And so what they were mentioning was the story, I think, of 2008 and the crisis of a business who many businesses reacted out of fear, similar as what we're doing with COVID, meaning there's so many layoffs and they're just trying to just save that bottom line, right? Like, how do I save my financials and survive? And what was beautiful with this story that they shared in this field guide was a business that kind of, once again, stopped, analyzed the whole picture, recognized everyone right now is in this fear zone and making decisions. But how do I consciously move myself into love? And instead of laying off all my employees, which strategically might make the most sense, but I know that I want to invest in them instead. And it was this really cool story of how this business was able to flourish in this time of crisis because they invested in all the places that were the most important on the long-term scale. Whereas everyone over out here was like selling and doing everything just to maintain out of fear, a scarcity versus abundance and love. So there's so much to learn from just that shift. And if we can just keep it as simple as my wise mother tells me is, you're either in fear or you're in love. And if we can all move towards love, that's where consciousness, abundance, growth happens consistently.
Yeah, it's acting not just from the mind all the time, but kind of using the 3 centers of intelligence, the head, the heart, and the gut. And it's kind of bringing all 3 together rather than just with the mind. No, I like that. There's a lot in there. So with Lisa, I'd like to hear your perspective around some of this.
Well, I have spent most of my career in the technology industry in Silicon Valley and here in San Francisco, and we are hardcore pivoters in our world. And 90% of startups fail. Risk is inherent in what we do. It's just a way of life. So pivoting is something, Dorothy Parker, great essayist and writer in the first quarter of the 20th century. One of my favorite things that she said, her writing advice was kill your darlings. So, your favorite sentence in the piece might not be the sentence that you need in the piece. Your favorite aspect of your business might not be the thing that survives. So I'm a communications coach. The thing that I do more than anything else is help brilliant people, founders, CEOs get up to be on stage. And always in the past, I worked in person because I needed to see their eyes, I needed to hear their breath, I needed to see how nervous they were. And I refused to work online with them. Well, guess what? Now, everything I do is online, but also the CEOs aren't on big stages with 60-foot plasma screens behind them. They are literally sitting in their living rooms, their dining rooms, delivering keynotes on their laptops, just like we're doing now. So I just radically shifted my business in 3 days back in March. And since then, I've been doing everything I could to think about how do we optimize connecting on this small screen. And so killing your darlings, and that's partly an intellectual decision, it's partly an emotional decision, but it's just like, I can't hold on to what isn't working. I have to go to where the market is, and I have to go to what people need. Brian Chesky, founder of Airbnb, obviously their business has been impacted. And so I was listening to on the Recode Decode podcast, I think he was on it in April, but listening to the process that they went through, how they did the layoff they did, how they streamlined their strategy, and they went back to first principles, which is, this is our core vision and our core mission. And even though I love all these ancillary projects, they canceled them all because they had to kill their darlings. My favorite book on this topic is The Obstacle is the Way. It's a super accessible book about Stoicism by Ryan Holiday. And it's just this it's like what Stephanie was saying. There's never a place, mountain climbing does not involve climbing the mountain and getting up on a plateau and then just sitting there and being happy. You're always, always, always climbing mountains. And one of the things, I have this on my refrigerator, he says, Elysium is a myth. You're always climbing mountains, get used to it and train accordingly. So you know, as an entrepreneur, we have this now, who knows what we're going to have next year? So it's always going to be something. So be nimble, have everything in your backpack, kill your darlings, and move on.
Yeah, I like that note, the idea of removing attachment, because how I think it should be isn't necessarily how it's going to be.
Kind of doesn't matter. I mean, if you spend any energy thinking about how it should be, you're only hurting yourself.
Right, because the world's going to give you what it's going to give you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to bring us to our next question here, which is kind of around emotional intelligence, because you know, ways of getting through fear often is understanding your emotions and how to work with them and how to express them. So emotional intelligence plays a key role in our lives, even more so as a business owner and leader. So for someone who's looking to expand and exercise their emotional intelligence muscle, what would you recommend? What are some resources that you might direct them toward in terms of how do I develop my emotional intelligence? And with that, I'll go with Lisa first.
Thanks, Alan. So I mean, we could spend an hour on just this, but I'm going to speak very briefly. Self-awareness is the place where we have to start. So you can't really see or understand anyone else if you don't see or understand yourself, because we're all looking through a filter. And whatever our filter looks like, we see everything in the world through that filter. And so we are trying to see another person, and we don't realize that in looking at that other person, we're really seeing a bunch of things about ourselves that we aren't aware of. So self-awareness, there are millions upon millions of different types of therapeutic methodologies and self-help and things that you can use to become more self-aware. But just to understand our own biases and our own narratives is really important. And then when we're looking, then we can look at the other people in our worlds. And the other people are, how do we understand who they are? So emotional intelligence is really the capacity to see and feel what's happening with another human. And so this is a super pragmatic example, but I was a PR person for 25 years. And you know what? If you tried to pitch a story to a reporter who wasn't writing about it or didn't care about it, you wouldn't get anywhere. So you had to really understand, what is this reporter writing about? What are they interested in? What are their ambitions? So I had a client that I was working with recently, law degree and a PhD, very intimidating, very quick mind, very aggressive. And he would steamroll everyone in every conversation he was ever in. And for him, it was revelatory. I asked him, I'm like, okay, before you go into any conversation, one-on-one meeting, anything, I want you to write down, what does the other person feel? What is the other person afraid of? What does the other person hope for? What does the other person need from this conversation? And start with them. Don't start with yourself. So what do they need? What do they want? What are they afraid of? What are they hoping for? And then you look at, how is what I'm doing, how does that align with what that other person needs? And you build it from there. So emotional intelligence is not something, I mean, yes, there are some people who are born with great EQs and have wonderful intuition. It is also a muscle that can be built literally just by stopping to say, well, what do I think and why do I think that? How do I see myself and why do I see myself that way? What does that other person want or need? Do I have any evidence to support what that other person wants or needs? And in the beginning, it's arduous, and then it becomes easier. And, you know, it's a path of graciousness and love to be able to do that with other people that you're interacting with. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, I like that. I think, you know, the self-awareness and being able to step back periodically and catch yourself so you don't just start going down a path of, you know, high emotion. It's being able to step back and assess the situation so that you can act in a more, I guess, a more direct way that makes sense for what's going on rather than reactive. So with that being said, I think, Rosemary, I'd like to kind of hear your thoughts around all this.
Well, thank you, Alan. This is probably going to surprise you because you know I've got a background in psychology, but the way I look at this question is to really stop looking outside and turn inward. Rather than emotional intelligence, I strongly suggest that people take the time to develop their empathy, their intuition, and also their vulnerability so that we can all relate to each other on a very genuine, authentic level. You know, we can feel what they feel. And when we develop those abilities, we also develop this amazing inner guidance system that we, you know, while we're learning to tune into other people, we're also learning how to turn into our highest selves, our enlightened selves, whatever you like to call it. But it's just a win-win. It's wonderful for us to be able to relate to others from a place of empathy and vulnerability. You know, we can sense what it's like to be them, and we can meet them where we need to. And we can also just gain that confidence, that certainty in our guidance from our higher selves, our enlightened selves, as to what the best path is to take. So, you know, trust yourself, trust your gut, your divine guidance, whatever you like to call that place that you go to when you meditate. And, you know, the answers are within.
Yeah, I think the empathetic side is pretty important, kind of really understanding what people are thinking, how they're feeling, what they might say, and what they might do as a result of kind of what's going on is really important.
Absolutely.
So Stephanie, I know you're going to bring some good stuff to the table here. So
I want to echo definitely this concept that Lisa and Rosemary mentioned of starting with ourselves first, because in order to be able to support or even understand other people, we need to understand how we work, and to be made aware of our unconscious biases, to be made aware of our strengths even, and what is, you know, I think there's a book on it, but it's our unique brilliance even. Like, what am I so great at that I get to continue to build upon? So I think we all kind of are on the same page. So I want to maybe give you just more tangible things that I personally did that were beneficial in my own path to building my EQ. Of course, I went to the first place, which was, there's a book called Emotional Intelligence. I think it's the same Strengths Finders people, but it's called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Travis Bradbury and Jean Greaves are the authors. Great space to start. There's a fun little quiz. I love quizzes. I've taken every single personal development course or quiz in the book, because I think that's the first step, is getting to know ourselves, getting to know what am I passionate about, and kind of hearing it from a third party as well. Or a resource, an evidence-based third party, I should say. The second thing that I did, which was really, really beneficial in understanding myself, was I actually built a very brief survey that I sent out to maybe 15 people that were someone in my close network. It could have been a person I had collaborated with in the past. It could have been a family member, a friend, a colleague. And I got their perspective on my own blind spots. So it was questions like, what do you wish I knew that you don't think I know right now? What do you see as my strengths? What is a memory that stands out for you when we work together? So I can really get to know me through the lens of other people. That helped build my self-awareness, helped build my understanding of how I'm almost represented, if you will, in my inner circle. And that was a big learning lesson for me, because there were specific things, and this is kind of the tangent to it, is we have to be open to receiving that feedback. So I think a great simple thing we can do is ask for the feedback, but be open and humble when you receive it. And it's hard to do when, in my case, I'm a very, like a peacemaker, I consider myself, with friends, and I have some people in my network who are very direct and straightforward. That is not my nature. I tend to shy away from conflict. I'm learning to have better conversations around things that are difficult, which, by the way, Conversations Worth Having, another great resource, Conversations Worth Having. They have a book out, very simple read, based on best practices by appreciative inquiry. I love these types of, once again, evidence-based studies. They've already done all the hard work. We just get to learn from it and now implement. So to recap, it's kind of create a survey about yourself, go seek out, you know, the resources that are already going to give you those tangibles. And in my case, I asked for that feedback, and then I was open to receiving it. and actually implementing in small, once again, small steps. Doesn't have to be this massive change all at once, but to take just those micro steps on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think key there is, open to be receiving feedback, because oftentimes that's kind of the hardest thing to do. So that's definitely one step forward. So I appreciate that. And then I think what I'd like to do is just sum up real quick. You started doing that a little bit here, Stephanie. What are some of the things that you're doing basically to kind of get through kind of the head chatter or the limiting beliefs or fear that's kind of being conjured up here with everything? Do you have a daily routine that you do each day? Do you meditate? Kind of share with everyone kind of what you guys do on a daily basis to kind of get through the fear. And with that, I think I'll start with Lisa.
Okay. So my daily routine is a little bit crazy. So the first thing I do when I get up, I learned this. I was at Esalen at the week between Christmas and New Year's, and our teacher told us to put our hands on our hearts like this and say, "Good morning, I love you." And so the very first thing I do when I wake up is that, when I'm still lying in my bed, and I'm not a morning person, so I'm like, "Good morning, I love you." Then I get up and I say prayers, then usually go to the bathroom. Then I meditate. I do transcendental meditation. And then I do a little bit, just a tiny bit of EFT, a tiny bit of tapping, just a couple of things. And then I have a 5-minute journal where I write what I'm grateful for and what I hope happens during the day. And then I have a bunch of affirmation cards that I look at. So all told, from the time I first drag myself out of bed to the time I'm done with that, it takes about 35, 40 minutes. And that really helps get me grounded and started for the day. And 2 other things that I do when stuff comes up. So when I feel scared, I will stand up and walk around my house and say out loud what I'm afraid of, my apartment, and just walk around and say, "I'm scared." In March, 90% of my clients canceled in a week. I had nothing on my calendar. And so it was like, "I'm scared that my calendar's empty." And I would just like walk around, "I'm scared that my calendar is empty." And then I would say, "But I've paid my rent every month for the 7 years that I've had this business, so I'm going to be okay." And I would just walk around and say that out loud. And if that would help, because it would take that loop out of my brain.
Yeah, it releases that energy.
Yeah. And the last thing that I do is, there are so many coaches who say this. Tony Robbins famously says it, but like you look at almost any coach and they say this. Byron Katie's big on this. Whatever's happening is not happening to me, it's happening for me. Mm-hmm. And so I will sit down, and sometimes I've sat down and done this like while crying, like, why is this happening for me and not to me? And I will make 2 columns, like, why is this happening for me? What is the good that's coming from what's happening right now? And the thing that I was most frustrated about with my job, my business before this, was commuting, in the car, driving down to Silicon Valley from San Francisco can be 2 hours in each direction, and it's exhausting, or all the airplanes. And guess what? Those are both gone from my life. So, the pandemic, you think, oh, it's terrible, but that's been a massive silver lining for me. So it's what's happening to me is always what's happening for me. If everything is always a gift, so that perspective really makes a difference. And sometimes it's hard to get there, but that's what I do.
Yeah, I think a good way to get that started is just having a gratitude journal and just write things you're grateful down.
Yeah, and that's in my morning journal. It's vital.
All right. Rosemary, are there some pointers that you'd like to give people, just kind of help get rid of that fear and start focusing on the good things?
I do. I'm very lucky because I've been doing personal development work for more years than I care to share. So I have a whole host of tools. When I first wake up in the morning, I sort of hold myself in that state between sleep and wakefulness to try and glean whatever messages I can out of whatever dreams I may have had in the night before, and I capture those. write them down. I also start with a morning meditation, and I have my own, which is something that I was taught by a spiritual mentor, an Irish spiritual mentor, an Irish Christian spiritual mentor, and she had a bit of mysticism to her practice. So it's, I have something that I do, and on days when the mind chatter is a little too loud and doesn't submit to that, I will turn to one of Deepak Chopra's 21 Days of Abundance meditations on YouTube. And they've got the background music. It's more of a full experience than just me doing my own thing. So that for sure will get me into a meditative state. Something that I created fairly recently as a visual reminder is I have a sign on my office wall directly in my line of sight that says choose. So whenever I find myself in a state that I don't particularly care for, it reminds me that I can choose a different state. And I don't know why, just how we're wired as human beings, it's so easy to forget that. And there are all kinds of other tools and practices, journaling. I can go and read certain things. I pretty much know at this point in my life what will give me a boost and what will bring me down and give me some calming. So it's, I just suggest to people assemble what tools work for you. Byron Katie's 4 questions, I put a link to that in the PDF I provided. That helps when you are stuck in, is this really happening? Is it real? Why is it making me feel this way? So, there's inner child work. There are all kinds of things you can do. It's just a matter of spacing your day out, change your mood, change your state. I walk 10 kilometers a day, usually 5 in the morning and 5 at night. And that's a nice window where I can kind of clear the cobwebs, get out in nature and, put the intellect on hold while the physical body and being present takes over.
Sure. That all sounds really good. So Stephanie.
Oh, and my gratitude journal, definitely. It's not really a journal. I use my iPhone and the Notes app, and whenever I'm grateful for anything, I voice record what I'm grateful for and capture it. So, and then I put them on little Post-it notes and I twist them up and put them in a beautiful big jar. And New Year's Day, I'm going to open those and see what I was grateful for all in 2020.
Yeah, that'll be a good one to definitely do. And a lot of people should do that one.
Yeah.
So, Stephanie, are there some ideas that you'd like to add to all this too?
I think the only other ones I would add that I didn't hear mentioned yet are things like music, bringing in powerful, positive music. I mean, I'm sure, honestly, if we asked everyone here, everyone can list out, hundreds of different ways that we can definitely pay more attention and be more present and build those routines. I don't ever want to underestimate the power of the people we surround ourselves with and the conversations that we're a part of on a daily basis, to be very intentional with the groups, the spaces. Everyone's got phones, right? We've got Audible, we've got Spotify, just so many amazing apps, the 5-minute journal to go along with the gratitude journaling. But if I can just share one learning lesson that I've had, I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist here. So I'm so disciplined. And so I got so stuck in building the perfect routine on a daily basis. I was the 5 a.m.er. I was checking off my boxes. I love Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. If you want a morning practice, that book's got it all. It's all the best practices pulled into one. But what I recognized on my journey of Miracle Morning was I was not waking up with energy. There were definitely so many benefits and pros to having that morning routine, but if I can share the learning lesson of grace and surrender, my 2 words, grace and surrender, especially for my type A perfectionists who are listening, or my overachievers, which I'm sure most of you are. If you've got some form of an idea and you're going after it, you're overachieving. You're going above and beyond the day job, right? So there's so many things that work, but find what speaks to you and just create space in a day to make it happen. I got too stuck in, did I meditate? Did I do my yoga? Did I do gratitude? It was like checking boxes versus what is really working and speaking to me? And does it have to be at 5 in the morning for me? Maybe it does. Maybe that's what's going to push you to wake up and do it. Or could it be at 10 p.m. at night, right? So just to be open to surrendering to just what's happening. Once again, because I'm a disciplined person, I might not give the same advice if you're kind of, woo, you know, whatever happens, happens, and you need the discipline. But to just have the grace with yourself and to really allow what speaks to you and works for you. And if you miss a day, you miss a day, and don't get so hard on yourself. I've spoken to too many entrepreneurs where, oh my gosh, it was the 30-day diet or whatever the fad was, and I missed day 15 or 16, and oh my gosh, now I have to start. And that's not productive for you. That's not going to help you, right? So just take a breath, and tomorrow is going to be a great day. And we start with the same kind of energy. So grace, surrender. You guys are badasses. I'm sure you've got all your millions of checklists and things, but just the one, keep it simple. That's been my big thing, is I get too complex. I make things too hard. Life should be fun. Life should be easy and seamless. We deserve it to be that way.
Yeah, listen to what you need, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I really thought you brought up a really good point there. Surrounding yourself with great people, with positive people. I mean, you can choose who you have around you, and they can have an influence on how you feel, even though you determine how you feel. But that energy can rub off on you. So yes, definitely spend some time around some people who might not be fearful. And it'll change. It'll change the way you feel. All right, so we've had a lot of good things, a lot of good conversations going on here. We're sort of running a little bit low on our time, but I'm going to throw one last question out, and we'll have to answer it relatively quick. And this is a question that came in from some of our guests. So how do I manage my employees' fear, even if I'm able to channel it as a fuel for myself? So I think what we'll do is we'll kind of go in the same order. So I'll start with Lisa here quick.
Well, I used to manage a couple hundred people, and I told them the truth. So I didn't care if they were 21 years old and they shouldn't be hearing about what the CEO of Asia was doing in our business. I told them the truth. So I feel like having everyone be empowered as equal adults and understanding the decisions you're making and understanding what's going on and understanding what you're struggling with. Here's what I know, here's what I don't know. Here are the decisions I'm working on. Here are some possible scenarios. Ask for their help, and then just keep them in the loop. People get scared when they are in the dark. And, you may need to lay them all off at some point, but if they understand what's going on with the business, they might be able to help you salvage it. And if they can't, at least they'll know far enough in advance that it won't be a shock to them. So I'm in favor of radical candor and transparency.
Yeah, truthfulness, authenticity, making sure everybody's well informed. That way they understand why you're making decisions as well. So, all right, Rosemary.
Well, I would only add one thing to what Lisa said, and that is proactively communicate. Keep them on board, like get them the truth before they might read something in the paper. Make sure that they know that they're on the team, they are proactively informed, and they are one of the insiders. They don't need to be bothered by that, because as it came up when we were discussing fear and uncertainty are very closely linked. So just let them know what's going on, be truthful, and do that in as timely a manner as possible, so that they don't get blindsided by hearing something about their organization from someone else.
I think that's a very good point. Yes, definitely. Delivering that information timely. Stephanie, we've got a couple more minutes yet, so I'd like to hear kind of what you have to say.
I spin this a different way, if that's okay. I've always believed that people need three things. They need to feel heard, they need to feel seen, and they need to feel valued. So if I know that, especially right now, teams are feeling fear is a huge emotion. At Integrous Women, we're all about building community and safe spaces. So to create opportunities for those voices to be heard and acknowledged, and to create safety and trust within that organization, within those spaces, I should say, where that voice is not only heard, but that there's actionable takeaways from there, right? That we don't, once again, sit in fear, but that we start to move and help as a culture shift us into this new emergent creative space. So asking questions like, what does support look like for you right now? Getting from the leader's perspective to the management team, to then the teams that are being held, I always hear we become a microcosm of what's happening in the rest of the team, but then into our communities and our partnerships in the world, right? So to, once again, as the leader of the organization or as a manager, or whoever asks the question, whatever role you're in, kind of irregardless, but to take that on for myself and to make sure that I'm creating the spaces for the voices to emerge and be heard. I'm acknowledging them, but that we're coming together to co-create the solutions. And we're not allowing it to fester in these small silos. And I love Lisa's, the radical transparency is huge, but to be mindful and intentional with the spaces that we create on a daily basis. If you're showing up as a leader, and I think Lisa gave the example, and you're steamrolling, or it's, this is all the updates, blah, 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 and no one had space or time to get their voice heard, which is why I'm mindful of my time right now, because I want your voices to be heard. But it's to really be intentional with the spaces, the safe spaces we create for that self-empowerment, and once again, to feel seen and valued in the organization.
Very insightful, very good. That's
Can
a
I
great
jump
way
in?
to...
Just with one point quickly, Alan. I think when you're doing this communication, if you have teams that span multiple generations, understanding how to communicate to each different generational cohort is really critical, because the millennials need a different style to the Gen X's, to the boomers. So as you are proactively communicate, make sure that you're doing it, that you're working with them in ways that fit their needs. That point, Stephanie, you brought up very well.
All right. Yes, I think we really brought a lot of good nuggets to the table today around how to turn fear into fuel. And I really thank you all for being here today and sharing your wisdom and your insights. And I'd like to also thank all of our attendees for being here today for this ThriveCast episode. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation today. If you have any follow-up questions or questions we were not able to address due to our time limitations, please send them to info@consciousbranding.com and we will respond to you. We'll also be sending you a link to this episode after we've kind of had a chance to get the recording all done and get everything up on the site, along with some bonus material to help keep the momentum moving forward with your business success. And by all means, feel free to share this with other business owners and your friends. And also, if you have any ideas for topics that you'd like to have us cover in the future, let us know at info@consciousbranding.com. And I guess the last thing is, I look forward to seeing you back. And remember, you create your world. So believe in your vision, drive it with purpose, and above all, take action. So until next time, be remarkable.